We are told to listen and follow the signs, trust the metrics, and listen to the statistic. But what if the very numbers we rely on are deceiving us? What happens when data which is meant to reveal reality becomes a veil that hides the full truth, or even a force of control? Good afternoon and welcome back to Data Speak on Diamond FM. Today we're exploring a fascinating and sometimes unseemly concept, and we're looking at this is called the tyranny of number, what data can and cannot tell us. I repeat, the tyranny of number, what data can and cannot tell us. And joining me in the studio today is Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke, a statistician and a data analyst from UI Lisa, University of Ibadan. Welcome, ma.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here, to discuss this powerful concept, because nowadays we live in a world where we are obsessed with data. We are taught to follow science, and we are taught to trust the metrics. We are also taught to listen to the figures, that is the statistics. But what happens when the numbers themselves become a force of control, a science or a source of misdirection? And perhaps at times it can hide reality rather than revealing it. And that's the tyranny of numbers. But before we go ahead, let me just start by saying tyranny of numbers is, we can call it a negative consequences that arise when we accept data as absolute truth without even questioning it. Because at times we don't tend to question data. We believe it is always true. And this allows for oversimplification of complex realities at times. It tends to dictate priorities in a narrow way and even obscure human stories behind the figures. So it's not that data is bad, but our misuse of it can be. Yes.
Now, thank you so much. If you're just joining us, this is Diamond 101.1 FM, and you're listening to Data Speak. We'll bring this to you every Wednesday, same time, same station. And like I said earlier, with me in the studio is Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke, and we're looking at the tyranny of numbers, what data can and cannot tell us. While she was speaking earlier, she mentioned something so fascinating. She said, and I quote, but what happens when numbers themselves become a force of control, a source of misdirection, or a veil that hides the truth? And this is what we call tyranny of number. And as a powerful starting point, let's unpack what this tyranny is all about. What does it look like? What does it look like in practice? How can something as neutral as number become tyrannical? Like stressing that word, tyrannical, still working with numbers.
Yeah, I get it right. But first, like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that data is bad. Yeah, so it's very, very far from it. We can say it means when we surrender our critical thinking to numbers without having to question the origin. We need to question where the data is from, where the figures are from, because it's not always right. It's not always truth. Yes, we need to question the meaning. We need to question the limitations. Yes, and with that, it might be free of risk that has been dominated by a flawed or incomplete picture of the reality. So the tyranny of numbers manifests in several ways.
I was about to say, like, tyranny of number, way. And when you said something like about being free of incomplete picture of reality, what was going on in my mind was like, tyranny of number manifesting what way? How do I see tyranny of number and I know that, okay, this is a tyranny? When does it become tyrannical? So
yeah, I get it. So it manifests in so many ways. Okay. I will start by saying the first one is the illusion of objectivity. So what do I mean by this? We often treat numbers as pure, or let's say facts. A number like, for example, when you hear 7% of economic growth, how does that even sound? How does it feel? It feels concrete, right? It'd be like 70% or 7% of economic growth. But behind that number, there are many countless decisions that leads to that 7% of economic growth. So what is counted as economic activities? What is counted as the economic growth? How is any other factors that might lead to economic growth, how are they factored in? Are they properly factored in? And is the informal sector, regarding the economic growth in this case, is it adequately captured? And the number presents itself, as an objective truth, but it is a product of many subjective choices. You get
when you say subjective choices, can you give us examples of what we're looking at?
Just like I mentioned earlier, when we talk about a particular, let me say factor, for example, I use economic growth. There are so many decisions leading to that economic growth. How do they say, okay, this is economic growth we are talking about? What are the factors behind it? Are they economic activities? What type of economic activities are behind the economic growth? For example, we have inflation. And inflation is one very key metrics when it comes to measuring economic growth. So is inflation factored in? How is it factored in? So we need to consider all of that. So thereby leading to subjectivity choices at times. So let me give you another example. Let's say 2 states might report different unemployment rates, right? But unemployment rate might have different definitions. One definition is to say, okay, only those that are actively applying for jobs, thereby they are unemployed. And another can say, okay, those who have given up looking up for job, they are also what? They are also unemployed. So the same reality produces 2 different numbers, right? So that's why at times you need to ask, where is this data from? How is it factored in? How did they get it? How is it measured?
So if I get you right now, for our listeners out there, this is very simple, really, but for more simplicity's sake, that means that if Ogun State is presenting, for example, 70% of unemployment rate, and Ibadan is giving 50% of unemployment rate, or let's even say the same 70% of unemployment rate.
Yes.
What you're trying to say is we need to fact check where this data is coming from.
Exactly.
We don't have to like say, okay, because Ogun State is saying 70%, Ibadan is saying 70%, that means the same thing. That means that Ibadan might have like, okay, they are considering, like you said, people are tired of looking for jobs.
Of course.
Ogun State is putting all this consideration into it.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so let's look at more ways by which Tyranny manifests.
Yes, another way in which Tyranny can manifest is when we oversimplify complex realities. What do I mean by this? Oversimplification itself occurs when you use quantitative metric to represent a complex, or let me say, qualitative phenomenon, right? So at times the metric can become a very poor proxy. You might not be able to represent the real thing, thereby there'll be a risk for that particular matrix based on any underlying goal the matrix is trying to. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say if you are to use number of patients, a doctor or anybody on seen per day, right? To measure, can you use the number of patients to measure the doctor's effectiveness? Can you say that the number of patients this doctor is attending to per day, we measure how effective he or she is? So if you are considering that, that means you are ignoring the quality of care the doctor is to provide. You are ignoring the patient's satisfaction. And you are also making the case to be complex for the doctor at times, because a doctor who spends more time with fewer patients might be providing a better care, right? But the data will make them look like less protection or less care, which is not so. So that's another way in which tyranny can manifest. So another way is, there's this saying, I don't know if you've heard about it before. They say what gets measured gets managed.
What gets measured gets managed. Let's get to that.
It's a famous mantra,
okay,
especially in business, actually. So, but this mantra has a dark side of it.
Mm.
What is it? Is that this mantra is trying to tell us that we tend to focus on our, at times we tend to focus on our efforts and resources only on what we can easily measure. You shift your focus and measure on only on what you can measure. But what about others that you can't really measure? For example, a school might focus on improving your exam scores or test scores because you can measure it, right? It can be measured at the expense of promoting creativity. Also at the expense of improving the students' well-being, critical thinking, and all of that. And all this well-being, critical thinking, they actually hard to measure. You can't measure them. So the number tyrannically dictates our priority at times.
Mhm.
And to break this down further, let me say, for example, an NGO is judged by the number of the wells they dug. Maybe perhaps the the role of an NGO is to dig so many wells in maybe a local government, a state, and the likes. So they may focus on digging many shallow, low quality wells, right, to hit a higher target. But what they are doing is not genuine, is not really quality, but because they want to go fast, which is in terms of numbers. So they do that rather than investing time in fewer quality well that will sustain for long. You get, so that will serve the community long-term water security. So this is another tyranny of numbers, whereby we need to take note of.
So in one word, it's about the power we give to this metric. So can you give us a Nigerian example where we might have experienced this tyranny?
Certainly. Let's consider road safety. So we often focus on number of fatalities, right? So it's number of fatalities actually is an important figure when it comes to measuring road safety and all of that. But the tyranny occurs if we only focus on that number. You can't focus on that because we might pour resources into patching a specific number of roads, mending them and all of that. And those roads, they are where the high profile accidents occurred, right? But better data, like, Prof was discussing better data, better than last, and yes. So better data like rates of speeding, seat belts, not compliance, vehicle road worthiness, and all of that, and even traffic light violations at times, number of drivers that violate traffic lights, maybe in a particular area, in a particular state, and all of that. So those better data might tell us what the real problem is. Yeah. Is the real problem the driver's behavior, or is it the vehicle status, the vehicle maintenance status, and all of that? So this tyranny of single fatalities number can lead to a misallocation of resources and a failure to solve the root causes of the accidents. Yes. Another example is when it comes to the academic sector in education. Actually, so a school district might be praised for a high enrollment rate because they have the high enrollment rate maybe per session or per semester, or as the case may be. Or if the student dropout rate is not also measured, is not addressed, then what are we talking about? That means the initial success is meaningless, right? Because if the students are coming in, do you also measure the rate at which they are dropping out? So the tyranny of this enrollment number hides the deeper problem. Yes.
The tyranny of the enrollment number hides the deeper problem. That's a very clear example. Thank you, Ms. Kafayat, so far. So before we go on a short break, let's establish the positive side. What can data tell us? What is its proper, powerful role? We've looked at the tyranny of data, so let's look at the positive side of data itself.
Yes, thank you very much. So data, when used wisely, in quote my words, wisely, is our most powerful tool to a lot of issues. because it can show us, for example, when it comes to what is malaria treatment, fever, and all of that, data can show us malaria rate spikes, in certain seasons. Which season does malaria occurs the most? Or it can even show us that a particular, in the education sector this time, a particular teaching method correlates with student performance. Data can tell us if this teaching method is actually as a result of the student performance or the other way around. So that means the data is revealing a pattern to us. In statistics, we call it trends. Yeah, it's revealing a pattern or trends to us. Then also, data moves us from, I think, or I feel, to evidence-based facts. We don't just think, we don't feel, we see it from the data. You get that? So it's the foundation of evidence-based policy. So we discussed that last week when Prof was discussing better data, better lives. Yeah. Also, data can shatter our biases. Prof also discussed this last week. We might assume poverty is a rural issue at times, that poverty doesn't actually occur in the urban district. But data can reveal this intense urban poverty, forcing a reevaluation politics at times. That is very challenging in most cases. So also, to measure progress, data allows us to ask, are your interventions working? Are they actually effective? Or is the situation getting better or worse? That is the power of data. Let me give you another example in the Nigerian system. The National Bureau of Statistics, that's the NBS. Yes. The NBS at times release different poverty data. Their poverty map data can challenge the assumption that the poverty is uniform everywhere. For example, let's say both in the rural and area. It can actually reveal specific local government areas whereby this poverty is extreme and where it is low. That's the power of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the goal is not to reject data, but to engage it more intelligently. We'll be diving much deeper into how to engage data more intelligently when we come back from this short break. You're still listening to Data Speak on Diamond 101.1 FM, and we've been discussing the tyranny of numbers. Stay with us until we come back. So in one word, all these data that we put, like probably we see online, some of them are really, really The next 10 minutes to discuss. Are you ready?
Yes.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Data Speak on Diamond 101.1 FM. I still remain Mark Anthony, and so far we've been having a very insightful conversation with Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke. We've spoken about the main topic we're looking at today is the tyranny of numbers, what data can and cannot tell us. And like I said earlier, if you are just tuning in, this is Diamond 101.1 FM. And so far, so good. We've spoken about what the tyranny of number is, the various ways by which they can manifest. We told you, and she specifically mentioned that tyranny of number does not basically mean that data is bad in itself. It only means that when we surrender our critical thinking numbers without questioning their origin, meaning and limitation, we risk being dominated by a flaw or complete picture of reality. She took us through the journey of telling us how various ways through which the tyranny of numbers could manifest. And then beautifully, before we went on that short break, we saw the positive ways by which data itself could be presented to us. Data could reveal pattern and trend. It could provide evidence, and also it could challenge assumptions, meaning that you do no longer have to say, still with me in the studio is Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke. Well done, and thanks for still remaining with us, ma'am.
Thank you.
So before we went on that short break, we said we were basically going to be looking at various intelligent ways by which you could engage with data, because the goal is not to reject data. The goal here is how we could engage more intelligently with data. And now that we're back, let's get into the specific reason why data can be tyrannical or misleading. Let's start with a big one: correlation versus causation. I like the two words coming together. Is like, oh, you're bringing water and fire. Correlation together, causation, what causes it? Let's go into that place.
Those two words,
they are just like saying
they are more than the sound. So
exactly.
They are perhaps the most common and the most dangerous pitfall for many of us out there. Yeah, correlation means that two things tends to happen together, but causation is telling us that one thing directly causes the other to happen. So data might show a strong correlation between, say, for example, ice cream sales and a drowning death. Does this mean that eating or drinking ice cream causes drowning? Are they correlate?
Ice cream.
Yes. Are they actually correlate? No. I'll answer that for you. No. Because the hidden factor here is that maybe the summer heat, perhaps the season we are in is the summer. There's a lot of heat. And you know that heat causes more ice cream to be sold because people will tend to take cold ice cream when there is heat and all of that. And more people will tend to swim as well during the summer heat. So which leads to more drowning.
Ice cream, drowning, correlation, causation. Please, but can you give us a Nigerian context of what you're talking about?
Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, let's say, imagine that a study finds a correlation between communities with more new mosques, or let me say churches, mosque or church. So, and the higher economic growth. I'm trying to say that a study finds correlation between community with more religious buildings and economic growth. Does that mean that building a place of worship causes economic prosperity? It's more likely that a growing or a prosperous community builds new places of worship, right? But the causality is likely to be reversed. Mistaken correlation for causation leads to wasted resources at times. Let me give you another example to understand this better. So a study might say the correlation between higher rates of literacy and higher ownership of smartphone or whatever any gadgets in Nigeria. Let's say I was the one that carried out this research, for example, and I found a correlation between literacy rates and gadget use. So it will be a tyranny of numbers to conclude that simply giving out smartphones will improve literacy. That's wrong, right? Because the real cause might be overall economic development, right? Which drives both better education and higher disposable income for all these gadgets.
Now we look at this conversation is beginning to get super interesting to this point that I'm glued. Now we brought two words, correlation, causation. You gave us a beautiful example of trying to find the correlation between higher literacy and then the ownership of smartphone. But there's this question we would always have to ask: what is the hidden factor? And I'm guessing that's another critical limit in context, isn't it?
Yes.
So what's the hidden factor?
So data without context is actually meaningless.
Data without context is meaningless.
It's meaningless. Wow. It can be worse, it can be dangerous at times. Let's take a university graduation rate, for example. A 90% graduation rate sounds excellent, right? But without context, it tells us nothing. Right.
So data without context means
nothing. So the thing is, did the university accept only the best students? Or why did they have 90% graduation? Did they accept only the best students to their school? Did it lower it as a standard to push students through? Or what? They just do that so that our students can graduate, we can have a high percentage of graduation rates. So what is the employment rate of those graduates when they graduate? When they leave the university environment, are they actually employable? Or they also end up quitting, looking for jobs?
They end up being that part of people who are tired of looking for jobs.
So the number alone is tyrannical. Yes, the context liberates us and gives the number its true meaning.
So it's just like saying, if I'm saying this is 90%, I'm trying to I should give a context of saying 10% this, 20% this, 30% this. Now for our listeners at home, you basically heard it. Data without context is Meaning like, so whatsoever thing you're doing, if you're going to be giving us numbers, if you're going to be giving us data, back it up with context. And then that leads me to this very beautiful question I have next. What about the human element? Data often struggle with capturing qualitative aspects of life.
Yeah, precisely. This
Mhm.
is a fundamental limit, actually. So data is brilliant at answering what, how much,
Okay.
how many,
Mhm.
but it is often terrible at answering why, how does it feel? You get that? So we can measure a drop, for example, let me use household income. We
Mhm.
can measure a drop in household income, but data cannot capture the stress, the anxiety, the social strain that causes that drop in within the family or within the household.
Mhm.
So let's take another example in the economic sector. A government uses data to decide which environment, or let me call it slums,
Mhm.
to decide which slum to clear for a new development project, right? So the data on land value, or let's say population density, is clear as well. But the data cannot capture the social networks within the slum. It can't capture the informal economics or the deep community ties that will be destroyed within that particular area. And this will lead to what? A, let me call it, human suffering. Yeah,
Hmm.
that never appears within the data.
Hmm. You've actually given us a very insightful one. And then there's this issue, the last thing you said will be leading us to the issue of bias. I remember the last segment with Professor, he was talking about data double, and then it was like, how does bias stepping into the number themselves?
Yeah, you
Uh,
explained clearly on that.
it does, but I would like you to go more into that too. And before, you will be hearing from Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke giving us more insightful talk on how biasness would come into data. We'll go on a short musical break. When we come back, we would be hearing that from us. So do stay tuned, get glued to your to your seat, listen to your radio station, and it is still Diamond 101.1 FM. Don't change that dial. And you're still listening to Data Speaks.
Yes.
Yes, so welcome back. What data can and cannot tell us? The tyranny of number. If you're just
Thank you.
joining us once again, it is Seed Data Speak on Diamond 101.1 FM, where we strive to promote values and excellence. And with me in the studio, so far for the past how many minutes is Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke, who has been speaking to us on the tyranny of numbers, what data can and cannot tell us. And before we went on that short musical break, we've seen where we spoke about the tyranny itself, various ways by which tyranny could exist. We saw the positive side to data. And then before we went on the very short break, she made a very powerful statement that data without context is meaningless. And for those who listened and have been listening to us, she explained how that could come in place. And like I said earlier, if you would like to go over this program again, please do well to check our social media page and watch the show, ask your questions, drop your comments, and we'll sure to answer them the next time we meet. Now, welcome back, Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke. Before we went on that short break, we were raising the issue of how biasness can come into data itself. So how does, and I know that the last segment with Professor E also mentioned something like that when we talk about data double. So let me ask you, how does bias step into number themselves?
Thank you very much. So bias can enter at every stage, any stage. So take for example, if you only survey people with internet access in a, maybe you have a research, you want to carry out a survey on people with internet access and likes. So when you survey people with internet access, your data will be biased against the view of those without internet access, right? In statistics, we call it sampling bias. Yes. So another example is if a police force, for example, is deployed more heavily on a low income, whereby let me say low income neighborhood, a police force is deployed on a low income neighborhood, they will record more crimes, right? The data will then show the area with more crime, or let's say it may even simply be as a result of where we can choose to look, but are they actually recording more crimes in more or less in areas with let me say high income neighborhood, but they are actually considering the low income neighborhood alone. So this, we can call it measurement bias in statistics. So another example to break this down better is, let's say a TV station runs an SMS poll on a particular national issue, right? The results are not representative of the country, but they are only representing the population that watches that channel at that particular point in time, right? So either people that are watching from a TV or that are streaming from their phone, or they feel like they want to use SMS to return. So this is another bias when it comes to, what about those that are not actually watching the channel at that point in time? Yes.
So exactly what she said. So to be free from this tyranny, we must become detectives, always investigating the story behind the number.
Yes.
Now, quickly, let's look at how we can diagnose the problem. We'll talk about, let's talk about the cure. Ms. Alobaloke, can you give us a practical toolkit when we are confronted with a startling statistic or a persuasive graph? What are those key questions we should ask to avoid being tyrannized? I like that word, tyrannized.
So I'm not actually prepared for this. Okay, so let's build the toolkit together.
Okay.
I can give you a checklist of questions to run through for you to be able to diagnose.
Checklist of questions to diagnose data.
Yes. A checklist questions also.
Okay.
So the first one is question the source.
Question the source.
Yes. What do I mean by this? Who produced that particular data set? Is it from a reputable or a transparent organization like MPS, for example, or a university, or maybe an independent researcher, or a firm. Yeah, so, or is it from a political organization that wants to use it for a commercial agenda or the likes? If it is from any of those, do they actually vested the interest, or do they have a particular vested interest in a particular outcome?
So we should
to be used
always
for the data?
consider the motive.
Exactly. Exactly. And the second is, I'll say, interrogate the measurement.
Interrogate the
Yeah, how is
measurement.
this data collected? Was it a survey? Was it an observation, or is just a model? What exactly is being measured? Is it a report, or perhaps, at times the reports might talk about a lot of things. Did you get your data from those reports? Let's say youth employment report, for example. How is the youth defined in that report? Do they define youth as a age, people that are aged between 15 to 24 years? Or do they define youth as people aged between 18 to 35 years? So the definition changes the number drastically, which is very important. Also, do you use a sample? Is there a sample representative, or who was asked? If it is a survey, who are those people that you asked these questions from? Who might have been left out?
Who do you ask? Who do you ask the question from? Who might have been left out? And then this takes us back to when we had the better data principle from our previous show.
Yes, exactly. So I'll also mention that you should seek context and comparison when it comes to this issue. What are you comparing to, actually? People say Lagos is the most expensive city in Nigeria, right? Well,
but it's getting expensive.
do you actually, when you say Lagos is the most expensive city, do you compare Lagos to Nigeria as a city, or do you also take Nigeria as a city or something? Do you compare Lagos to other African mega cities, or do you compare it to global cities, like, for example, in the New York? Or what are you telling us that Lagos is the most expensive city? Which city are you comparing Lagos to? The claim changes the meaning with the comparison. And finally, the most important question of all is, consider what is not being measured, or what is not being displayed, maybe in the spreadsheet also. So remember the limits of data, what human stories and what factors are missing when it comes to numbers. You have to consider what is missing, because that might be the most important factor at times that you have to factor in. But does this data capture the entire reality? Because you might have left out something very important. Or just let's say, just the easily measurable part of it is what you consider. You're not considering the important parts that are not easy to measure. So I'll say I'll stop there for now.
I know if time permits us, you would have given us like more than 15 incredible toolkits. However, I would like to say the 5 you've given us so far has been so incredible. And yes. Okay, so I would like at this point to say these tools have been so incredible. They are incredible toolkits. And remember, what led us to this was we talking about the cure, the solution to the tyranny of data. And we mentioned that first thing you need to do is to question the source. Am I correct, Ma? You interrogate the measurement. That's by asking who is it left out, who did this, who did not do that. And then we also talked about seek context and comparison. She also mentioned that we should consider what is not being shown or measured.
Yes.
Now, if you've been listening to us from the beginning, this is Data Speak on Diamond 101.1 FM, and I am still Mark Anthony. And with me in the studio since we started is Mrs. Kafayat Alobaloke. Good afternoon once again, ma. Thanks for coming around for this edition.
It's a pleasure to be
And for those who really miss the show from one thing or another, you can always go back to our social media and do Facebook, other social media platforms to rewatch this program. Drop your comments, your questions, and I promise you would respond to them on the next edition.